Hey everyone, and welcome to a new series I'm doing where I am going to show you how I carve one of these gnomes. They're a lot of fun to make. There's little gnomes with the little butts hanging out. They're a lot of fun, a lot of cool things and designs you can do to them. And yeah, so hopefully you guys enjoy it and carve one yourself. So let's begin. Alright guys, first thing you're going to do is grab a block of basswood. I like to use these 1.25 by 1.25 by 4-inch blocks. They make for a nice size gnome, right about that size. So let's get started. What I like to do first is take my pencil and draw a reference line down the middle of each side. Doesn't have to be exact. And I like to draw in a line at the bottom for the feet. And I come down, I like taller hats, so I come down pretty low where the bottom of the hat and the top of the nose begins. You can see here. You know, and the nose will land somewhere right in there. I like to extend that line a little bit less, right here and here. Give that hat a little bit of a flare downward. And again, in the back, I like to come down just a hair and, you know, angle it down. Bring that around and connect. So you'll have the hat somewhere in there, whatever shape you want to do. And you know, you can box in the nose if you want. You can do all types of different noses. For these guys, I generally like to keep it pretty simple, round. You know, I don't like to go too crazy. And then that's really about it for now. What I'm working with today is my Badger State blade. It's pretty new. I've been enjoying using it. Works really well. It was nice and sharp. And I start in the corners. I like to start where the hat is and just block out the corner there. I do one side, move to the other. Just like that. You can't knock off the corners. They kind of get irritating when you're holding the piece. So I just take off a little bit off each corner. Makes it a little more comfortable to hold in your hand. A lot less hot spots, as they call them. Now, and I just keep working my way back on that line. What I like to do is kind of go around the hat first, all the way around. So again, on the back now, I work on the corners. The corner there. I just keep attacking the corners. Makes quick work of it. Helps if your blade is freshly stropped. Take your time. There's no rush. Nice and smooth, easy going. Be sure to wear gloves. I know I'm not wearing any or any finger protection. I know I should. I just don't find it all that comfortable while I'm carving. I like to be able to feel the wood and the knife. Connect that hat. connect it here. The great thing about carving is there's no rules. You don't have to do anything you don't really want to do. You don't have to go in too deep. It helps if you do, but you can make this as deep or as shallow as you want. Sometimes the deeper you go, it gives it a nice little look to it, but you can give them a shallow hat. I tend to round over the corners anyway. It just kind of helps with painting, which I don't like to do, but part of the process. I'm going to finish connecting the hat, just like that. Now I connect the hat up here where the top of the nose is. Again, I made this curved, makes it a little bit more challenging to kind of get at, but just take your time. It's easier if you attack each side, and then you can kind of connect them like that, while rounding up the top of the nose. Just like that. Now for the nose itself, you can come in on each side. It's kind of easier if you start out square like that. You just dig your knife in straight, and then you come at an angle and take that chip out nice and deep. You're trying to create a nice depth to the nose. Do that on the other side. Now you don't have to do it in one shot like I am. I've been doing this a while, so I'm a little bit more comfortable with the knife and the cuts I'm making, but you can take your time and do it in 2, 3, 4, 5 passes, however many it takes. And there you go, you got a nose somewhat blocked in. Then I come across the bottom of the nose, nice stop cut there, and then right up into it. Now if you don't make your stop cut deep enough on the bottom of the nose and you come up, you can rip off a big chunk of the nose. It's happened to me a few times. So really make sure that you have that stop cut set in there and create that nice ridge. Also, you want his nose to protrude out. So, gotta go back in. Off some of these corners. Start getting the shape of the beard and the mustache going. Can round over the nose, knock off the corners. And again, you can get as complicated as you want with these. You can create detailed noses, you can add eyes, you can add mouths and all types of crazy expressions if you want. For demonstration purposes, I'm keeping it fairly simple just to kind of get the overall shape. And you can just kind of keep working the nose, knock off all the saw marks. You can push it back if you want. Like that, and you can always clean things up later. Round off the bottom. keep this guy's nose pretty round because he's a gnome. All right. Once you have that all blocked in, I like to then go to the feet right on the corner again and start notching out his feet. For his feet, you kind of want to go pretty deep. So you want his feet to protrude outward. You can come across. Now I draw these pencil lines just for reference. They don't actually really mean much to me. I don't care if his feet are 1/4 inch or 3/8 or 1/8. It doesn't matter. I just go based on the visual aspect of it. I generally like to start out a little bit thicker because when I start rounding things over, they tend to get smaller. So it's easier to just start out thicker. So I'm gonna really dig in there. Get his feet set in. Now I dug in here about 1/4 inch. And you can kind of see him come into shape. You know, here's where his beard is going to be, here his feet, his nose, his hat. Draw our line. Now I like to separate the feet. You can hide them under the beard, you can do whatever you want. You can give them 1 foot. You can carve little toes if you want. So I go in and do V cuts to get that separation. Then I'll do 2 triangle cuts like that. 1, 2. And I'll finish the triangle and pop those chips out. Clean it up a little bit. Start rounding off his foot. You can round off his foot on this end a little bit more. Give it some more shape. Round off the top. And you can always go back in and reestablish that foot if it gets a little funny looking. Might go back in here and reset the divide in his feet. And again, just take off those saw marks. Now you got his feet, his nose, a rough beard, and a hat. Now since we already drew the center lines on the side, that's a good indication of where his beard is going to be and where his arm will be. So you can come down maybe halfway or so, both sides. And at that mark, you can do a little bit of a diagonal line to establish his arm going into his pocket. Come up there. Now, none of this has to be perfect, like I said. It's just carving. It's just fun. Get crazy with it. You can give them a big arm, one hand out of the pocket, one hand in the pocket, holding something. Whatever you want to do, it's your carving. I like to try to get it somewhat even if I can help it, but it's not necessary. So that's where his elbows kind of come out. Now here what I like to do is take my knife and go straight in and draw it pretty deep in, all the way to the crook of that arm. I'm about 1/8 of an inch deep with my knife. You can go back in and run it again if you want. And then you can come at from this angle into that corner. Kind of just set that in. Now, I like to then do a V-cut, angled in, and just pop out that sliver. You can do it on both ends. The key to this type of cut is trying to only do it once. Otherwise, you'll create these lines and divot lines like you see right in there. That's where my knife went in twice and it wasn't in the same spot. Not a big deal, but if you don't like seeing that, try getting it done in just one shot. I also like to come in the other angle and just soften up that arm. Give it a nice V-cut. I'm sure there's better ways to do it if you have the tools, if you have a V-gouge. I predominantly like just carving with a knife. I'll finish up with some gouges and some veiners and stuff towards the end to get some details, but a lot of times I'm carving on the go and I just don't want to carry a bunch of stuff with me. It's easier to just carry a knife. Alright, so I established that lower half of his arm. I know it looks a little funky, but we'll clean it up later. You can go in on the other side now. Same thing we just did. Now, if you're skilled enough, you can do this whole thing in one shot. Both the upper and lower section of the arm. It helps, but not necessary. Just makes things a little bit quicker. Now, I found it easy to make a little notch in his arm, just to kind of give a reference point on where to stop that cut, because his arm does have to bend. So that notch is helpful. There we go. We got inside of his arms set in and the outer edges of his beard. Now you can kind of see how blocky he looks. I like to swoop things in to give it a little bit more depth. So I'll take out a chunk, nice sweeping cut like that. Do it on both sides. Now the beard is where you can really get crazy with these guys. You can do all sorts of flowing patterns if you want. You can keep it pretty straight and rigid. Like this guy, he has a nice flowy curved beard, tilted head. This guy I kept pretty straightforward. So have fun. The beard's a great thing to experiment with when you're feeling like experimenting. Now, many of you may recognize this carving. To me, it was inspired heavily by Doug Linker's 1x1 series of a gnome that he carved. And it's pretty much exactly the same step and style, except I'm not using a 1x1 and I'm adding a little bit of different elements, but it's essentially the same. If you haven't seen it, definitely go check out his videos. Doug is amazing. His teaching style is really great, his videos are really great, and everything he makes is just amazing. So thanks, Doug. I've learned a lot from you. Now, you can establish the bottom of the beard if you want. You can have his beard come all the way down to his feet. I kind of like to leave a line and section for his legs. So what I like to do is kind of connect where his arm ends and his beard meet, because we've already kind of have that line there established. Again, coming at the corner. This time I come from underneath. Alright, we're gonna continue his beard by undercutting it one side, and we will do the other side. Sometimes it can get a little bit tricky here. You don't want your knife to slip, but just take your time. A little bit of cuts. There, we got a nice undercut on his beard. And if you wanted, you can start to shape it a little bit and knock off some of these corners. Just like that. Do a little bit of cleanup. All right. We have his beard, his nose, and some of his arms roughed in. We can now continue with the rest of his arms. What I like to do is I'll cut the pocket like that, and you can kind of establish the elbow. Do a little cut like that where the elbow is going to land. Sometimes I don't do that first. I like to cut out his pocket just to kind of get a good idea of how thick I want to make his arm. So I'll cut out his pocket just like that. Get rid of some of these chips. And then you can kind of continue that line down. And create his arm. Just like that. Do the same thing on the other side. Establish where his hand is going to go in his pocket. Cut out a notch for the elbow and just connect the two. There you go. You want to try and make them even. These are a little bit off, so you can kind of just come back in and clean it up to make it even. Again, it's a gnome, doesn't really matter. It could be uneven, off to the side, whatever you want to do. I like to make them even, just as a little bit of a personal challenge. So now that we have his elbows cut in and his arms pretty roughed in, I then will connect the back of his elbow up to the back of his head, or bottom of his hat. And this is where I will then connect that line to the bottom of his hat and remove a chunk out. Kind of round this corner off and cut the back of his arm in. Same thing on the other side. Cut in and just cut that out. Round it off a little bit. Move some of the pencil line. Now here's a little trick that I like to do is I will do a triangle cut right in these corners. So I'll press in one side, press in the top side, and then I will pop that triangle out to give it some depth and a little bit of a shadow. Do the same thing on the other side. So just in one side, in on the other side, and pop out that chip. It gives it a nice little depth, and then I'll undercut in the middle. You can kind of round that off a little bit more. Move some of the fuzzy chips that are in the way. If you have one of these brushes, you can use that. Just shape as you go along. Remove any unwanted spots or cuts, things you don't want. Just like that. Okay. Moving on. At some point, for me, I get a little bit of annoyed with this big block on top of his head. So I'll kind of roughly shape it just to kind of take a break from doing some of the detailing. Give your hands a little bit of a rest, and I'll really start to shape in the hat. You can knock down the corners very heavily on this. If you want a rounder hat, you'll have to make sure you went deep enough here to round it off. You can keep his hat blocky or square. I like to give his hat some sort of shape to it. I usually like sweeping it kind of back in that gnome fashion. But I really give it a lot of curvature to it. So I remove a lot of material. And again, if you're not comfortable taking big chunks of wood off, just take little cuts like that. Take you a little longer, but it's a lot safer. So I just work my way around, getting it pretty round at first, and I'm swooping in. So I'm creating those swooping cuts to it because I do want his hat to curve. So I go in, and then as I'm pushing in, I'm rounding it outward. So I get rid of all of the rough edges. Here we are, towards the front again. Give your arm a little bit of a workout. Keep going. Knock off any high spots that are catching your hand. Now, if that's all you want to do, that's all you can do. You could leave it as a little stumpy top hat. You can put a little mushroom on top or whatever you want. Again, I just like to keep it pretty simple and keep it a gnome hat. So I'll continue to work my way around, refining the shape. Now let's see, what do I want to do with this hat? I feel like it's naturally kind of going back, so I think I'm going to give it a little bit of a sweep back like that. Something like that. You don't have to stick to that, but sometimes it helps to give you a little bit of a reference line. Start to round over the top pretty heavily because we want to get a really deep curve to the hat. And this is a pretty tough piece of basswood. It's pretty hard. Which is never fun. Just keep working your way until you get a shape that you are happy with. There, I kind of like that. Refine it a little bit more. And again, this is something you can come back to and add more detail to later, which we are going to do. But I like to just kind of get the shape in now. Just like that, we have a gnome hat. Now, if you're fortunate to have a bandsaw, you can do a lot of this work beforehand. But not everyone has a bandsaw, and sometimes it's fun to just make big chunks of chips with your knife. All right, I think we'll give the hat a little bit of a break for now and leave it like that. moving on. Now, for his arms, they're a little bit too flat. You know, I like them to curve inward a little bit, so you really want to just kind of start where the elbow is and cut it kind of inward towards his hat. You may have to go back and recut some of the lines for the inside or his beard, but that's okay. You really kind of want to knock off from the inside of the elbow, crook of his arm here, all the way up to the hat. And you kind of want to do the same from here to where his hand is, so the elbows stick out. You can do that a couple of ways. You can come in that way. You can, just find whatever works for you. And then you could just kind of knock off the saw marks and the blockiness while still kind of rounding over each edge. You can bring this down a little bit so his hand now sticks into his pocket. See the difference from this blocky shape here, whereas here it's a little bit more organic looking. We'll do the same on the other end. Just like that. I gotta recut his beard here. Separate his arm from his beard. Get rid of some of these little chips that are stuck in there. Use your brush, get them out. All right, we'll just round this other arm real quick. Again, we're gonna bring that hand into that pocket. Try to pay attention to the grain when you can, so you don't tear anything out. Round it over. Recut out some of these funny parts. And there you go. Now that same triangle trick I did back here, I like to do on the inside of his pockets. So right here and here, cut out that little shadow line. Get on the other side. There you go. Give it a little bit more depth. Same thing here. 1, 2, and 3. Pop the chip out. 1 cut. 2 cuts. And 3 cuts. All right, we are getting there. Before we go any further, we probably should have established the back of his legs here. Again, I don't really care where the line is. I don't measure much of anything, but I like to aim roughly where his feet are, maybe a little bit higher. And that's where like his legs will come in. Right about there. Also, what you can do, which is a nice little detail, You can mark roughly where we made our cuts to soften the edges, about 1/8 of an inch from the corner of his foot back. You can draw a line to splay his legs outward, and then you can just remove that material on both sides. And it gives him a nice little splayed profile. You can round over these corners, and then I start to work on the back of his legs. Again, I attack the corners first. And we're going to remove a good amount of material here because we're trying to get his legs in a really bent and squatted look position, I guess you'd call it. So you go in fairly deep on both corners, and then you would connect them and remove all this material out from the back. And this is one tough piece of basswood. Really putting my knife to the test here. Which is another thing. Don't be afraid to stop and strop your knife, which is something I am about to do right now because I feel like it's resisting a little bit. And yeah, can never hurt. So give me a second, I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. I stropped my blade. Should be as good as new. Cuts really well. And we're back at it. So we are cutting in the back of his legs here. Oh yeah, that's much better. And we got some really good depth there. Make sure we got our center line. And we're gonna cut out a notch for the back of his legs. You don't have to go too crazy, but again, I'm gonna round off this section just to kind of give it the appearance like he's wearing jeans. So just knock off the corners. You can reestablish that center line. And here I do that same triangle cut I did on the front, where I'll come in at a 45-degree angle on one side, cut inward, 45-degree angle on the other side, creating that triangle shape. And then I'll just come in underneath and pop both of those chips out. Might need to go back and forth a couple of times to get it, but it should come out. And clean it up. You can round off these hard edges. You can leave them if you want. Depends if you want a carving with a lot of facets in it. Some people really like that. Some people don't. It's whatever you want it to be. I like to make sure my cuts are pretty clean. I don't like a lot of these weird chips that you see. Now, the main attraction for these guys is I carve them with their pants hanging down and their butts hanging out. It's a pretty easy thing to do. We already kind of have it blocked out here. We can come up to right around where his elbows are. Doesn't really matter. You can go higher or lower. But on this particular one, I think right about there is good for his shirt. And, you know, his butt will fall somewhat in here. So I like to establish where his shirt is going to be first. So I will come across that line. Again with a stop cut. Just like that. You can round it. Get rid of some of those chips. All right. So next I will draw a line to establish where his pants will hang. And it's pretty visible where you can see it with a flat spot that we left here. Right at the bottom of that flat spot is a good spot for where his pants will sag. I just kind of draw this U shape. Just like that. Now, if you want to use something different, not a knife, you can use a V-tool or a veiner. Again, I want to keep it pretty basic and just use my knife, but you will follow that line all the way around. Just like that. Clean up these corners a little bit. Kind of want to tuck it in so it looks like it's sticking out. And then we just want to round this piece off. Give it a little bit of shape. And just like that, round it off. Go back in and clean up some of these lines and edges. Get rid of some of the fuzzies. Sometimes you have to go back in a couple of times. All right, there you go. Now for the crack. You can draw a straight line with a little curve. high, you can make it low, you can do whatever you want. Now this part I found a little bit tricky with a knife. I think a V-tool would probably be best, but it is possible. I come straight down first, like that. And then I will make a V-cut, very small V-cut, while following that curve. And again on the other side, making that V-cut, and then you see how I'm like twisting the blade and following that curvature shape. Do some cleanup. Now here's where I've had the most trouble, is getting that top section. It kind of tends to want to split apart from you. So I've found making one of those little triangle cuts pretty helpful, but a very small one. See, I'm just removing like a small little chip. And then you can kind of just gently shape that. And go back and re-round things and reshape it. You can leave it a little bit more crude. But yeah, that's how you get that in there. Go back in and clean up his arm. Knock some of that out. There you go. Got a gnome with his pants hanging down. And we're pretty much at the home stretch here. You can go in and establish his legs. So you press in straight. You do those same V-cuts straight down into his feet. You can go back in a couple of times. Again, this is one of those areas where you can really get carried away and start chasing one of these inside fuzzy bits, and you'll never get to it, and it'll drive you nuts. So you kind of want to just do this in 1 or 2 shots and be pretty accurate with your cuts. Otherwise you'll get a bunch of weird pieces in here that you can't reach and can't get at, just like that. And we don't like those. I'll do another V-notch here to kind of establish where I guess his crotch will be. Again, this is another optional part. You can leave it as is, you know, the beard can hide it. I like to add it, gives it a little bit more character, I think. And yeah, you just kind of shape things as you go, rounding things off. Get rid of any funny looking lines that you may have cut in. Now, one of the great things about these guys is you can get as detailed as you want. You can add a bunch of wrinkles, you can add different types of pants and overalls and all types of crazy amounts of detail. You really can get carried away, and that's kind of my favorite part about these carvings, is going in and adding all the details. First, before we do that, we'll just kind of round off all the sections that are still have hard edges, like where his pockets go. You know, just kind of removing some of this bulk material. Give it a little bit of a more flowy type of look. Like here's a very hard edge. Just round that off. Remove any of the saw cut edges. Here where his pants are hanging low, you can remove that hard edge. Now the same thing we did in the front with his front legs, you can do where his back legs are, and it's a nice little detail as well, because his legs are separate. So you can draw a line, you can come straight in. Same V-cut. 1 and 2. Maybe there's better ways to do this. This is just what I have been doing and what works for me. But gives it a little bit of depth. You can also knock off. See, his legs are very blocky still. You can remove a good chunk from the back of his heel here, like a good 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch, like that. And, you know, kind of recut some of that, round it off. See how it just kind of gives it a little bit more of a pose where he's squatting down, I guess. And you could take it even further if you wanted. You'll have to recut some things, rework it, but gives it a nice look. All right, I also like to leave his pants drooped over his feet. So I'll just extend that line down. You can just follow that line with a stop cut, and I work my way in from his shoe. Not from the pants outward, but from his shoe into the pants. It helps create a more pointed out look to his foot. Just like that. Same thing on the other side. Remembering to kind of maintain that round shape of his foot. That. You can break those hard edges again. There we go. We got his pants cut in, his feet cut in. Now for his beard, you can do a lot of things. Like I said, you can shape it any way you want. You can add details, smile lines. You can really go crazy. So I'm gonna just knock off all these saw marks and hard edges. So you can see what I did here with this guy. He has a very simple look. I just drew in a mouth, I cut the line, cut it out, and then did some V notches to create some texture in his hair. This guy I did a little bit more detail. I added a mustache and a beard and some depth and texture to it. You can really do whatever you want. I think for this video, I will just show you something simple to keep it pretty easy. Let's give him a little bit of a... I don't think I like this guy to be smiling. Let's make him grumpy. Yeah, like that. Like he kind of doesn't care about what's going on. Now I just sliced that in, very simple mouth, cut that out. You can go back in a couple of times, but try to be careful with how things line up. Otherwise you'll end up having to chase these little slivers in there, which can get annoying. And that's about it. He's got a nice, I don't care face to him. All right, now if you want to add some texture, it's really easy. I like to do this a lot on all my carvings, especially these little gnomes. I add all these little cutout lines to his jeans and into his hat and his arms. I'm gonna go with his arms here. I kind of don't like how they look, how low that is. So this kind of helps save it a little bit. I will go in and cut out some of these notches so it looks like folds in his shirt. And that's where it can kind of hide some of the awkward shapes you might have gotten while cutting in these arms. And you can add 2, 3 of these. You can add as many as you want. I noticed that any more than 3, it kind of looks a little weird. So I'll stick to 2. Sometimes I'll do 3. You can do it to the other side. You can keep them close together. Key is trying to make these cuts clean and really only do it once or twice. So I'll come in once, straight in, at an angle, and then another angle. So it's essentially 3 cuts to achieve it. And you can add, you know, creases up here if you wanted. You're just cutting out these little notches. You can do them here. Make it look like he has a long sleeve shirt that's crinkled up in his pocket. You can add some this way. You can really do whatever you want. Some back here. Some over here. You can go sideways, angled. He's a hillbilly, so his clothes probably don't fit him too well anyway. Probably a little loose. Now normally I take my time with this and I make sure all my cuts are clean. It just kind of helps towards the end when you're painting. You don't have a bunch of weird fuzzy pieces sticking to your paintbrush. But for the sake of the video, I'm moving a little bit quicker than I normally would. And I'm just gonna cut in some more of these notches. Very easy to get carried away doing this, by the way. I don't think it hurts anything by overdoing it, but sometimes it can be a little bit too much for a small, simple character. Like this arm seems a little bit excessive to me, but doesn't matter. Now the same I like to do for his pants as well. It's kind of random, but I also try to find like a flow of how the pants would sit. So they're baggy right around here in the back because they're sagging off his bottom here. So I like to think that they would bunch up right around here, so there would be a lot of folds and creases. That come in from both angles. Here, it's good to get a couple of them in if you can squeeze it. And you don't have to do exactly what you do to one side to the other. Sometimes the symmetry is not really good for these because you're trying to mimic clothes, and clothes don't fall symmetrical. Sometimes they sit a little bit different on one leg than they do the other leg. Sometimes a chunk of wood will break off where you don't want it to, and you gotta adapt just like that. I also think they bunch up a lot towards the back heel area. So I'll tend to put a lot of those cut lines and folds back here. And you gotta be careful doing that with the knife here, because this is a spot where the wood can tend to break off, and if you're not careful, that knife will go right into your hand, and then you'll have a bloody hillbilly. Nobody wants a bloody hillbilly. You can add some here, wherever you like. Sometimes if you make your gnome tall enough, his legs will be longer, and you can add a little bit more detail inside his legs. This guy's a little bit too small, so I'll just stick to making one cut there. Do some more to the other side. This is what I mean by, like, you can get really carried away with the details, because you can really go nuts with this. You know, there's some of these guys where I just went real crazy, adding as much detail and folds and pockets and zippers and all types of weird stuff. Now what you could do is, if you wanted to give some depth to his boot here, you can draw like a little line. A V-tool would be great for this. Again, if you don't have a V-tool, you just come in with your knife and you notch out across that line. And it kind of just creates the sole of his boot. This is a very delicate area to do this, so please be careful. It's very easy to snap that chunk off. So I'll come in, one cut, and just kind of pop out that little. And like here's a very awkward way to hold it. So take your time. Find what's comfortable for you. If there's a cut you're not comfortable doing, don't do it. and just take a minute, take a step back and look at it and think about how you can cut it safely. Always be mindful of your fingers and safety. I can't stress that enough. Take your time. If a cut's not safe, holding it one way, try another way. Or just don't cut this detail unless you feel confident. Or you have a V-tool, which would make a pretty quick work of it. So here's where it gets a little bit awkward for me. And see, that almost just broke out right there. So I'm coming in from the other end. I'm gonna just notch that out. And there you go. You got a nice boot sole detail. Now if you wanted to add beard details, you can. You can add little lines and little notches. You can notch out the bottom of his beard here and give yourself little bearded details. You can come in with your knife and take out V-cuts like that and give it a little bit of flow. Whatever you want to do. Sometimes it's nice to do that. Sometimes it's nice to just leave it, you know, plain. I like to add a lot of detail to these guys because I think it makes them look pretty cool, but not necessary. Now I'm doing this with a knife. Again, you can do it with a V-tool or a gouge or whatever you have on hand. Sometimes the V-tool, I don't particularly like V-tools. I find them a little, they either cut not deep enough or too deep. And I find I have better control with the knife. I can angle it. I'm just used to using the knife a lot more than the V-tool. I much prefer veiners. I have a very small, tiny veiner that I like to use for this type of stuff. There it is. You know, you can do that. But the veiner leaves a very, like, shallow look to it. And I like that hard depth edge to it. But do what's comfortable, use what you have, and have fun. There you go. You can add a little bit more detail under his nose if you want. You can give him nostrils, whatever you want to do. Sometimes it's nice to add some stuff under the hat. Don't neglect the sides. It's easy to forget about them. Always take a step back too and look at your carving from all angles. Give yourself some distance. It really helps create the shape and get a fresh set of eyes on what you're working with. Sometimes we're just a little too focused. We're a little too close to the project. And you kind of get lost in how it looks and the perspective and the details. All right, I think we'll leave it there with his beard. One of the last things I do is with the hat. It has a very hard, rough edge. I don't like that. I like to round it over again, so I'll give it a little bit of a round over. I'll come in, remove any of those hard edges and those saw lines and the pencil lines. Inspect over your piece too, like I see some hard edges and saw cuts over here we can get rid of on his shirt and his elbows. You'll have to recut some of his details here. And yeah, work our way around the hat. Now you can leave his hat sharp if you want. You can round it even more. I'll come back. I don't like how heavy that round over is, so I'll just tighten it up a little bit. Creating those swooping cuts to maintain that shape. Now I also like to add a lot of hat details as well, so you can add these same kind of cut details to the hat. I also cut in notches like that. I like to think his hat is ripped. You know, he's a gnome, he lives outside in the wild, in the garden, he's a hobo or whatever. So he's got a beat up hat. Sometimes you can group them together to create a little bit of a cool pattern. Do one going one way, one going another way. You can make some deep, you can make some shallow. You cannot add any at all if you don't want. There are no rules, like I said. But this guy has a nice beat up hat. One of the other benefits of rounding these over on the hat is when you go and paint them, there's a really hard edge, the paint tends to chip. And you'll see the exposed wood, which is not a big deal, but... And then I'll go in and I'll add some hat details. Boom. Go crazy with it. And you can keep it basic like that, just straight cuts. You can add curved cuts. Sometimes I like to add one of these. I guess you'd call it like a stitch almost. A very worn, tattered hat. I also like the combination of threes. So I like doing 1, 2, and 3. Kind of grouped together. Don't forget up top. Here, you can get a little tough up here because it's end grain. But if you have a nice sharp strop knife, you shouldn't have a problem. And again, you can go crazy. You can leave it alone. And there you go. We got a gnome, a butt gnome, which have been really fun to make. They look pretty cool. And they're just funny. Alright guys, there you have it. You got your very own carved butt gnome. They're a lot of fun to make. I hope you guys try them. If you do, send me a picture of how yours looks, and I'd love to see them. So hope you'd enjoy this one, and let me know if you think I should make more tutorial videos like this. That's something a little bit different for me, but we'll give it a shot.